Futures trading involves risk and is not suitable for all investors. Content provided in this segment is meant for educational purposes and is not a solicitation to buy or sell commodities.
Hi, welcome to the July 6th edition of Basis Loaded with Joe Schmit. I am Joe Schmit. This episode, as always, is produced by Paige Driscoll. This is the July 4th edition. What better way to celebrate America's independence than with the latest from the NDPSR report, starting with butter. This butter number coming in at 242.48 represents a plus 5 to the CME 1 week average of 237.44. We traded 9 loads on the CME, which is not a lot relative to recent weeks. However, good volume on the NDPSR, north of 3.8 million pounds. So in the butter complex, butter begrudgingly holding north of this 240 level, printing higher than expected basis on higher than expected volume. Certainly good news for the manufacturer in butter. In cheese, this block number, 147.14. That represents a plus 7.5 to the CME 1 week average of 139.65. 8.5 is really nice basis, especially considering we traded 49 loads on the CME, almost 2 million pounds at the CME minus freight, and we were still able to achieve that 8.5 positive basis. So just an exaggerated basis in blocks. Volume here on the NDPSR, however, falling a little bit short. So we had all that volume on the CME, almost 2 million pounds, and then still coming in almost 1 million pounds short of our expected 12.5 million pounds for the weekly total on the NDPSR. So that higher price came at a cost, and it looks like end users pushed back on some previously negotiated contracts. In the barrel, the story is similar, 156.44. That represents a plus 4 to the 2 week average of 152.35. Now, similar to blocks, we traded 56 loads of barrels last week on the CME, well north of 2 million pounds. And then once again, this NDPSR volume only at 12.8, well short of our expected 13.5. So all that weight at the CME does not show up here at the NDPSR. Of course, any sales at the CME that come from the manufacturer should be included on this NDPSR report. And the fact that this volume is coming in well below for both barrels and blocks shows that these prices, and of course this is the last week that the benchmark for barrel is in the 150s. And even with all that weight trading on the CME, it is not reflected here on the NDPSR. Both blocks and barrels coming in 1 million under the expected volume levels. And what's interesting, as for this being the first week of the July pricing cycle, and this both being the high block and high barrel, you would presume of the 5-week July pricing cycle, the fact that that high week has substantially lower volume will go a long way in influencing the total cheese weighted average when we incorporate all 5 weeks and all their volume when we come up with the final cheese number. And in whey, 28.92. That represents a plus 1.5 to the CME 1 week average of 27.60. We traded a whopping 62 loads on the CME last week, north of 2.5 million pounds. And in the 12 weeks at the CME that we've seen this increase in volume, 62 loads is the second highest week, coming short of the 75 loads that we traded in that same 3-month time frame that we've had all this activity at the CME. And at this point, I think it's a good time to reflect on how great it is that we're actually able to see all this price transparency at the CME. Once again, the CME proves to be the benchmark to watch with all this price discovery taking place in a public forum. It certainly is an advantage that the dairy markets have over most other commodity markets. 28.92, this week's NDPSR average, is down 3 from the June 17th average of 31.96. So as I mentioned, we traded 2.5 million pounds on the CME, almost 7 million pounds here on the NDPSR. So if you take our expected volume of 4.5 million, you add that 2.5 million, that puts you right up against this 7 million pound number, and that's where we ended up. That weight that traded at the CME, that 2.5 million pounds in the low 20s, went a long way to pulling that NDPSR price down 3 cents from prior week's NDPSR, that June 17th number, which was close to 32. So the manufacturer was able to move a good amount of weight, but had to discount 3 cents to get it done. 28.92 was probably lower than most people were thinking coming in, a big decrease under prior week's NDPSR, but the manufacturer continues to stay current, moving big parcels of product at that discounted level. And then last but not least, non-fat, 115.35. That represents a minus half to the CME 1 week average of 115.90. We traded 17 loads on the CME. Light volume is also reflected here on the NDPSR, coming short of 16.5 million pounds, more than 3.5 million pounds below our expected 20 million pounds. So both disappointing price and volume in non-fat. So this is week 1 of 5 for the July pricing cycle. Currently getting a July class 3 of 1370 with July class 4 well above at 1792. We still have a little bit of pricing left for the July calculation. We'll see what they have in store for us in the weeks to come. Until then, on behalf of Paige and the entire EverAg Insights team, I'm Joe. Thanks so much. See you next week. Bye.